Hope and Patience with Amelia Rope, a podcast about business, well-being and chocolate.
Wow, I'm here. It's the first episode of the first series with my first guest. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Amelia Rope, and for the past 13 years, I have had an incredible experience running my own chocolate business. Now it's time for the world of podcasts. Hope and Patience will be exploring the challenges of running a business, but also taking care of yourself along the way. One thing is that my life has been one of quite a few chapters, and I wasn't someone who just went out and got one job and made a career. And my first guest is a really key example of how life can be made up of many chapters. I would say that he's almost made up a book from his chapters. So I'd like to welcome Rohan Blacker, founder of Pooky Lighting, as my first guest on Hope and Patience. It's a real privilege, Rohan, to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I realised actually that I've known you for a decade.
Yeah, that's pretty much right, since we first bought a lorry load of chocolate off you.
You did. So, Rohan, just to put you lovely listeners in the picture, I met Rohan because he and his business partner put in a commission for 1,000 chocolate bars, and each chocolate bar was to go out with one of their sofas. And from there, I sold into Selfridges, Liberties and loads of places. So Rohan is really an instrumental player into my first chapter and why I'm here. Anyway, Rohan's chapters include a matrimonial lawyer, running a pub, running a catering business, running a soup company. He has really done a heck of a lot. He also co-founded not just one highly successful company, but a repertoire of 3. Deliverance, Sofa.com, and now Pooky Lighting. So, Rohan, your first chapters, a lot of them, would you talk us through them and how you shifted from being a matrimonial lawyer and a solicitor into pubs, restaurants, catering?
The reason why I became a lawyer in the first place is because I did a law degree. And I felt that having sort of been through a whole lifetime of education up to the age of about 22, and I took a law degree from Bristol, and I managed to pass it. I then went on to get trained as a barrister, and then I found myself, instead of being a barrister, I sort of pivoted to become a solicitor. And I thought I should give it a crack because I'd done all the sort of prep work, so to speak, for it. And I realised actually pretty quickly that I wasn't going to be much of a great lawyer. And one of my curses, strange enough, not that I'm dyslexic, but I'm an incredibly slow reader. And in the law, you need to be able to pack in a lot of words, and you need to be able to I retain them. I just don't read them fast. And I tried to go through various speed reading courses, and I just couldn't do it. So after a while, I just plucked up the courage to go off to my boss and said, you know what, I don't think this is for me. And I was incredibly nervous about doing this, and when I did it, I remember he looked at me because I think that's an unbelievably brave thing to do, Rohan. And I mean, perhaps it was. I don't know. I guess I could have had a very comfortable career as a nice matrimonial lawyer in the Shires somewhere. But anyway, that wasn't to be. Then I spent a little bit of time sort of hacking around, not knowing what the hell to do. I did various little jobs here and there, and working behind bars, etc. And actually, when you look back on your life, there are sometimes these very significant moments. At the time, you have no idea they're significant, but they turn out to be the most critical crossroads. And if you hadn't, turned left, or if you turned right that day, or picked up that newspaper, or done whatever it was, then your life arguably would have been entirely different. And strangely enough, for me, that sort of pivotal moment in my life, when I look the whole way back, was when one morning I picked up a newspaper, and in the back of the newspaper there was an advert for this extraordinary, strange Gothic chateau, which was down in the southwest of France. And I had this sort of loopy idea, and those were in the days when you could pick up chateau. You still can pick up chateau for not very much, but those days you could really pick them up for tuppence. So I went, I got on the train, I went to the southwest with a view to think about if I could persuade enough people to put, like a sort of a timeshare of some sort. We could buy this thing. Everyone could have a week a year. I could develop it, blah, 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 blah. Of course, that wild scheme never came off. But as a consequence of that, I met various people. And I met one particular bloke called Sean. who was also involved in the same sort of business in the southwest of France. It's quite a long story, this, but it's relevant to how I got into the catering business. And then Sean one day mentioned that he was getting involved in this sort of pub restaurant thing in Parsons Green. So I just called him up and said, "Can I help in any way?" And so that's how I got into this first sort of proper business that I ever did, which was a sort of, I think we kicked it off in about 1993. And it was a pub stroke restaurant. Well, you wouldn't necessarily call it a gastro. The term gastropub hadn't been coined at that stage, but we did. We had a restaurant upstairs, we had a trendy bar downstairs, and it kicked off, and it was crazy, crazy, crazy busy for all the time I was there. So that's how I got into doing my own thing. I was only one part of a sort of partnership there, but that was my first business.
And then from the pen, you then moved into catering and...
Yeah, well, basically at the pen, we had a great time and it was a lot of fun. It was incredibly badly managed. I learned a lot about what not to do in business, and we had an interesting fallout, but and there's not much point in going into that. But I had to move on, and so from that, with the chef who was working there, who was a great mate of mine, who had become a great mate, we then set up an event catering business, and from the event catering business, we then found ourselves we needed a kitchen. So in the back end of Battersea somewhere, we found another kitchen, and there was an incumbent business there, which was called the London Soup Company, which is not like the Covent, the very successful Covent Garden Soup Company. But they made great soups. And we wholesaled them to, when I say we, because we took over the London Soup Company. So then for a while there was the event catering. So for that we were doing the weddings, we were doing the, sort of loads of office parties we did, and we hired these quite large, amazing old sort of warehouse venues on the river in London, and we just had a brilliant time doing that.
So from the London Soup Company and the catering company, Did you then sell them, or did you just shut up shop?
No,
or?
The soup company I sort of gave to a friend of mine who thought it looked good and who thought it might tie in quite nicely with the business he had, so I sort of gave that away, frankly. The catering company just sort of wound down gently because it was time and it was exhausting, and it wasn't it was making a little bit of money, but it was not really a good business to live off.
And what if there was one sort of major challenge that you came across during that time? What do you think that challenge was, and how did you learn from it?
Well, actually, strangely enough, from the restaurant time, the challenge was learning to work with other people and learning to work within the team. And I definitely, I just sort of put up my hand and volunteered to become a partner, one of 4 partners. And I learned a lot about probably the type of people you wouldn't want to go into business with in the future. We were incredibly lucky because the business was just, the place was popular, loads, we were absolutely rammed. The restaurant was full all the time. So it was a lot of fun. But as a business, it was spectacularly badly run. So we didn't lose money. We didn't really make any money. And so it sort of, informed me that, you've got to keep all the nuts and bolts right. It helps to have a great business partner, someone who who you can see eye to eye with. And you need to keep all those important things about a business sort of operating, the numbers, all the sort of housekeeping has got to be in order, because as soon as you let it sort of fall apart, the business actually just begins to fall apart, and you have no handle on it. Okay,
so then you moved out of that sort of chapter of your life, and you moved into Deliverance, as far as I'm
sure.
And so it would be great to hear how you met Pat Reeves, who was how I met you, and your business partner for a long time. 20 years. And how you sort of propelled yourself along on that incredible pathway.
Pat came to me, sort of mistakenly thinking I was some sort of business guru who had made a good cut of it in the catering industry. And he wanted to set up a sandwich bar. It was the early-ish days of Pret. Starbucks hadn't come to London, for example. We worked incredibly hard to try and do this, actually. And we had all the plans and all the ideas, and we couldn't get a site, for love or money. So we were newbies to the game. We didn't have any covenant. We didn't really have a huge amount of money to put down as as a rent deposit, and landlords just didn't want to know about us, and anything that was good was taken up by Pret or the new boys coming into town. And after all, we just gave it up. And so I turned around to Pat one day and I said, look, I've got another idea, which I think we should attempt to revolutionise home delivery. Because I think home delivery in the main is absolutely terrible. It's the sort of food of last resort. You get back home after a hard day's work, you find all these sort of crappy menus lying on the doorstep. And not that you want to, but you haven't got anything else to do. What you had delivered to your door back then was, yes, it was quite cheap, but it was pretty disgusting food. So we said, look, why can't anyone just deliver basically quite good food? Of course you can deliver good food. So we set up the business. We called it Deliverance, which was a good name. And in fact, it was a brilliant name to have.
Who decided the name? Was that you and
Well,
Pat,
actually, it was a mate of ours who one day said, well, you've got to call it Deliverance. It's perfectly obvious.
Lucky you didn't come after that and say, hey, I was the one behind the name of the brand.
Well, and also, so we called it Deliverance, and then our strapline was Culinary Salvation, which upset a few of the more religious people, but it was a really nice little strapline. So it was Deliverance, cooked fresh, delivered fast, Culinary Salvation. And we found ourselves a kitchen. It was 1,000 square foot by the heliport in Battersea. It was a really grungy little kitchen. But again, it was in the days when you could do things like that. Everything came from the second-hand store. We painted the kitchen with this, what we thought was really good floor paint, which all came up in the first week on the bottom of everyone's shoes. So it was seriously done on a shoestring. But
had either of you, you'd got the catering experience, so you knew what equipment to get in.
To some degree, yeah. Well, look, as I said, we replaced everything, relatively quickly because, all our second-hand fridges were collapsing around us, and we had no idea. So it was interesting. So we had no idea. I had no idea about Chinese food and how to get a Chinese chef. We had no idea where to find a good Indian chef. So we ended up actually calling up the head chef at a then very famous Indian restaurant called Chutney Mary, based down in Chelsea. So I just called. I said, "Look, can I speak to the head chef, please?" Guy called Mr. Bhatti, and Mr. Bhatti. I said, "Look, I need to meet you. I want to find a chef, and I'll pay you 500 quid as a sort of introduction if you can get me a couple of Indian chefs." So he did. He found us a couple of the most lovely men you'll ever meet in your life, Wassam and Shanu. So they became our Indian chefs, and then we needed to find a Chinese chef. And again, so Pat and myself went to Chinatown in order to, and we had lunch in this Chinese restaurant. And I said, all right, Pat, go and talk to them. Ask if you can talk to the chefs. He said, I'm not doing that. You bloody do that. And I said, I'm not doing it. And we suddenly got the fear and we didn't know what to do. So we ran out of it. Well, we paid and we got out of the restaurant. And then Pat later on decided that he would just call Ken Lowe's wife. So Ken Lowe had died. And he called, I think she was called Anne Lowe. He said, look, I'm looking for, can you recommend anyone? Because I don't know anything about anything. And Anne Lowe said, well, I've got this fantastic guy called Tim Tang, he's a brilliant chef, and he's one of these amazing vegetable carvers. He could turn a carrot into a sort of Aston Martin or something. And
I would have liked that. Flash cars became his weak spot, didn't it?
It did. And so gradually, a bit like the Blues Brothers, we put the team together, and then we got a Thai chef from somewhere, and then we got actually my friend Oggy and his wife became, they were from Bosnia, and they became the pizza chefs. So I said, just find out how to make bloody pizzas and come back to me in a week.
How did you plan? I'm sort of thinking with my chocolate head on here now, but I'm thinking you've got a hell of a lot of fresh ingredients potentially hanging around.
Yeah.
If you didn't get many punters ordering their, I don't know, margarita pizza. Actually, margarita's a cocktail, or is it a pizza?
It's both.
Both, there you go. But if
I think they might be differently spelled.
Oh, perhaps they are. But anyway, the point is that what would you do with the waste? Was there huge waste of the food? And manpower? Did you just have all these chefs hanging around hoping to get orders in?
Well, the amazing lucky thing is that we were just busy. Put out 5,000 menus day one. We wandered around Battersea just lobbing them through doors. Thank you, that's the word. And, we all sat around in the evening just looking at the phone thinking, do you think it'll ever bloody ring? And then it rung. I think actually the first phone call I think we got was from my mother going, "Oh, darling, has anyone ordered yet? Mum, get off the frigging phone." Anyway, but then the phone did ring.
Yeah.
And then it rang again and again and again. And we were, of course, in the very early days, there was food waste. But actually, strange enough, it just, whilst we had a lot of things on the menu, food waste was not an issue for us at all. And we were just, we were constantly trying to fight to keep up with the demand. And in a way, we could control the demand, because if we wanted more business, we'd just go and drop a few more menus. I mean, our marketing was incredibly. We didn't do any advertising. The only advertising we did, we designed a beautiful menu and we dropped it on people's, through people's door.
I remember having them drop through my door. So with Deliverance, you and Pat then decided to sell the business, and which was a fantastic move, I would imagine.
Well, it was the right thing to do, because the business was getting really complicated. It was big. It was becoming unmanageable. It was not necessarily manageable by us anymore. We were a couple of sort of sad old amateurs. So yes, someone came along and said they'd like to buy it. We thought that was a great opportunity. So, and we've been doing it for 7 years. Bang on. So we sold it 7 years to the day that we started it up.
So on that note, Rohan and I, are going to sneak in a little chocolate moment. And Rohan's pick of chocolate is Terry's chocolate orange. Now, what I didn't realise is that before the Terry's chocolate orange, which was launched in the early 30s, there was a chocolate apple. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that. I mean, I presume they don't exist anymore, but...
Well, I think the orange sort of took over.
The orange works so well because it's segmented. I don't know how you would eat a Terry's chocolate apple.
And I'm sorry, listeners, you're going to hear the rustle of the packs, and you're going to hear us enjoying a little chocolate moment.
Oh my God.
Oh, that really did explode.
Yeah. Okay, they're all over the floor.
Anyway,
but I'm going to have one nevertheless.
Tuck in.
A nice little segment.
And we won't get too sidetracked, because obviously we've got a show. This is my first show, Rohan. Come on, we've got to get on it. So, Rohan, on to sofa.com.
Sure.
And that was your second venture with Pat. Mm-hmm. What was one of the major challenges that you faced with sofa.com?
Okay, what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to set up a backstreet sofa store with Pat and Rohan's Sofa Emporium. So if we were going to do it, we wanted to have, to use a poker term, the nuts name, the best name you could possibly lay your hands on. And we discovered that the URL sofa.com was actually potentially available. It was being sat on by a leather sofa company in Milwaukee in Wisconsin. So we called up, and a guy picked up the phone and we said, "Look, we understand that you've got the URL sofa.com. Are you interested in selling it?" And he goes, "Yeah, well, I guess everything's got a price." And so, well, okay, fantastic. What would you imagine that price might be, sir? And eventually he comes back and he goes, "Well, I think I wouldn't sell it for less than $1 million. That's like $1 million for 4 letters. That's 125,000 quid per letter." Anyway, then followed about 6 months of negotiation, and we did eventually buy it for $200,000. And at the time, we didn't realise that the guy we were buying it off actually just turned out to be any old Joe Schmo who was working in this company. He's the guy who picked all of it. He wasn't the owner of the company. And the bank details on the contract that we signed with this grand firm of lawyers in New York happened to be his private bank details. They were not the details of the company. So he then absconded with all the money with his girlfriend down to South America. He was eventually apprehended and arrested. It was an extraordinary thing. But the truth is, we bought it in good faith, with a legal and fair contract. So, this all came to light, the crime of it, about 6 months after we kicked off the business.
And one of the stories that you told me about, which sort of tickled my humour, which was a major challenge, was you and Pat being over 6 foot, designing sofas for your height, your length of leg, and then realising that the average punter, like myself, is 5, 6.5.
Absolutely, yeah. Again, this was just total naivety. So we designed these sofas. Why would we design sofas? We had no idea about it. Anyway, so we designed really big sofas for really big men, and we thought that was right. And then, of course, we got a lot of people calling up and going, yes, we'd like to return the sofa. It seems to be rather large. It's rather uncomfortable. So, we had to rein that in. We had to change it, And these are all obvious things. I mean, well, at least they should be obvious. This chocolate's very good, by the way.
Goody. I know I haven't had my piece. But you did, both you did phenomenally well with the business. And you then, you sold.
We did, in the end. Well, what happened is poor old Pat got ill. He was diagnosed with cancer, and he just went off for a good old-fashioned colonoscopy, which is, and I called him up in the evening and said, how's that, mate? Because he wouldn't believe it. I got stage 4 cancer, which, and I go, what does stage 4 mean? He goes, well, put it like this, they don't do stage 5. And suddenly, obviously, his whole world imploded, and 4 years of really tough treatment ensued. So I was sort of left running the business. He was sometimes involved, sometimes not involved. The business for him was, it was a really wonderful therapy for him because, it gave him a bit of sort of normality. But at the same time, he was in and out of chemo, and he had, drugs coursing through his body, which, sometimes put him in the most brilliant mood, sometimes put him in the darkest, blackest mood. So it was a difficult time, and we agreed after a while that, we should probably try and sell the business. And it felt about the right time. Again, in the same way as Deliverance, it was, the business had grown quite a lot. It was getting quite complicated, and in a way, it was the right time for someone else to take it on. We'd sort of roughly achieved what we'd said. Well, not that we started, not we ever knew exactly what we were set out to achieve, but we had created a new way of selling sofas, in the UK. It was very, very much a loved business by our clientele.
It was phenomenal. So that was obviously a major challenge with Pat. And so you then have moved into lighting, into Pooky Lighting.
Yep.
How did you end up in lighting? And, have you got a big team that you're running and cash flow for? I'm just imagining a hell of a lot of stock that you've got, warehousing.
Well, there is a lot of stock. And in a way, that was the big risk for this business. Why did I set it up? I set it up for the really hopeless and ridiculous and sort of nondescript, non-business way. I like lights a lot. I think they're important. I think they entirely change the mood, the vibe, the atmosphere in any given space. I didn't do it because I saw a particular gap in the market. I mean, actually, I think there was a gap in the market. I think sort of mid-market, there were very few decent lighting retailers, but I did it because lighting is fun and lighting is beautiful and lighting is interesting, and I just felt it would be an enjoyable business to go into. And of course,
but you're doing this on your own. I mean, this is a business without a business partner. So is that?
I've got a brilliant sort of CEO who's a partner in the business, and he's not a partner in the same way as Pat was, because Pat and myself always did everything religiously 50-50. We did lots of businesses that we haven't mentioned here, and we always did 50-50, irrespective of how much money we were able individually to put into the business. It was that was the deal. We worked as a team. So this is my business, yeah, and it is different. It's the first business that I've ever, well, since Pat died, and I did 7, 8, 9 businesses with Pat that I've done on my own. So there was a sort of added pressure, sort of psychologically. I mean, I really wanted it. I know this sounds pathetic, but I didn't want it to look as though I'd just been carried by Pat all those years. I mean, Pat was totally brilliant. He was a wonderful partner to have, but for myself, I wanted to prove that I could do it by myself. And it's been quite a struggle, actually, but it's now gaining traction. It's becoming every bit the business that I wanted it to. But it's taken a lot longer.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, the times have changed, so now things move so quickly. Is it more has it been more difficult setting the business up in this day and age where everybody's online and everybody's doing everything? So
look, when we set up sofa.com, there were obviously quite a few players online, but it was very different to what it is now. So we set up sofa.com in 2005. And it was almost like a desert compared to so when we set up Pooky, which was 2014, the web high street was just the busiest, noisiest, most congested place you've ever been, and everyone, it was like some sort of strange sort of marketplace with everyone shouting, screaming, trying to, like in vegetable markets where everyone's trying to sell basically the same apples. So to get heard on the web these days is really tough. Loads of people selling lights and light bulbs and green lights and red and all sort in every, the thing that web gives you is it enables companies to specialize down to the tiniest detail. So anything you want from wherever, you can find it on the web. When you kick off these businesses today, you've somehow got to do something that people are going to notice.
So with Pooky Lighting, do you feel that it's a business that could take you to the next chapter? Do you feel it's going to be your last chapter?
Oh, God, it's not going to be my last chapter. No way at all. I've no idea where I'm going to be next week or next year. I mean, I'm really enjoying this business at the moment. When a business gets to a certain level for me and it becomes complicated and process driven, and you have to have an HR department, it becomes beyond my control. And there's very often a time when it is right that someone else should be looking after that business. Yeah. It's not because I want to cash in huge sums of money. It's because this, in the business's development, it's the right thing to do at that time.
So now, Rohan, I want to take my listeners and myself on a little exploration of really sort of an entrepreneur's mindset and how you make decisions and how you cope with balancing your life and looking after yourself when it's really full on. But one thing that I'm always fascinated in is whether it's in your DNA to have your own business, to have your own gig. Were your parents self-starters? Were your grandparents?
There's a bit in the family. I mean, to be honest, not so much. My father was a farmer, so, he went out every day and looked after sheep and cattle. So in terms of food, there's quite a lot of catering in my family. My brother's a chef. My uncle ran quite a successful restaurant in London. So yeah, it was around me, but I wouldn't say it was hardwired into my DNA at all, no.
The word entrepreneur is bandied around a lot. What in your mind, for me, I see you as an entrepreneur, what in your mind defines an entrepreneur?
You evidently need to have a degree of self-belief. You need to bring in quite a lot of different sort of pieces to the puzzle. One of which actually is leadership, I think. And I think that's an important part of it, because you can't do any of these amazing sort of exciting things without persuading your fellow compadres to come on this journey with you and to try and carry out what your dream. And you can't do everything, and you talk to people all the time, goes, oh my God, I'm so busy, I don't have a single moment in every day. And the answer is, well, you shouldn't be. You need other people to help you, because you'll burn yourself out, because and people get so holed up in their businesses. So you need to be able to pass on the message and lead the gang in your direction. So I think leadership is a very important one. Obviously, you need a good idea, you need the passion, you need all that. It's a much banded around word. It's a frustrating word a bit.
And the other banded around word that always fascinates me is success. Because I know that when I had my business, my frustration was that my turnover was never really reflected the success of the people that I was supplying and where my brand was sort of positioned. So I saw it as a financial thing then, now I don't when I look back. How do you perceive success?
Well, I'll come over all hippie here, obviously. Success is not a financial thing. Success is the value that you create, or how much. It should be measured entirely on different things. And I can't bear it when someone goes, oh God, so-and-so is so successful, meaning they've just got, an overflowing wallet, because that's just silly and wrong.
So moving from dabbling a bit into you and sort of your thoughts on entrepreneurs and success, one of the things that I think is really important when you run your business, and something that I took my foot off the gas with at times, is well-being, which again is an overused word but so vital. So I just want to touch on a few things to ask you about how you handle things like stress and exercise, so that perhaps it will help our listeners. So you've got a family. I can't remember how many. You've got 3 girls.
Three girls.
Three girls. So you have been a busy man with your wife, bringing up the children and running these businesses and spinning 100 plates. So how did you take care of yourself at that time, sort of mentally, physically?
In the past, I didn't take care of myself at all, and I undoubtedly smoked too much. I definitely drank too much, and I lived life far too fast and too hard. Fortunately, I didn't burn out, but I look after myself a lot more these days. Actually, one thing I do, I walk quite a lot and I cycle quite a lot. And actually, we're lucky enough to have a pool at home, which in the winter is pretty damn cold. But I swim in that as much as I can. I think the sort of cold water swimming thing is brilliant. And however much you don't want to do it, it makes you feel great. But equally, walking. We've got a couple of crazy spaniels. I walk them every day, and it's a great time to just wind down and think. Whether I walk with someone or on myself. We read all the time about the powers of walking, the restorative powers for the brain, and so walking is as much about the brain as it is for the old legs.
So do you eat well? Do you have a balanced diet? I have to tell you, listeners, that he is readily tucking into his Terry's chocolate orange.
I think a lot better now than I used to. Where I've got to stop myself is I've got to stop having seconds. I know that sounds really basic, but I do take quite a lot of exercise. So I'm big, but I'm not ridiculous
but
big.
You've got that extra foot. I always dreamed of being a bit taller to stretch myself out. So on the dreaded word stress, how do you find that you sort of combat it?
One way to combat stress, to be honest, is not to drink too many pints of beer or too many bottles of wine. If you are not drinking alcohol, I'm sounding like a sort of evangelist here, you can cope with so much more in life. And it is quite outstanding.
And sleep. I mean, sleep is just, even if you don't sleep the whole time, the quality of sleep is phenomenal.
It's really good.
It's good. You wake up alive.
And you discover a whole new you that you just had completely forgotten. And you haven't met this you since you were 14 years old.
It's good.
But it's quite good inside.
It's very liberating. And if you have a favourite book or a favourite song that you'd like to recommend?
Am I allowed to recommend Charlie Maxey's book or not? No.
Well, you can do. I'm about to recommend it too. I've got it in my bag. It's my new Bible.
Well, I would recommend Charlie Maxey's new book. I mean, he only brought it out. I mean, it's caused the most enormous stir very, very quickly. It's beautifully presented. It's beautifully drawn. And the way I look at it, it's almost like a Bible for modern living without all the sort of encumbrances and religion getting in the way. It's if you can follow what it suggests in that book, and which phrased so sharply and succinctly, then that's. I mean, that it's not a novel. I read a lot of non-fiction. And I love all that. But as I mentioned right at the start of this, I'm a super slow reader, so I can spend at least a couple of months reading one book, which I love.
That's really good. Actually, two things before we wrap up. Is that obviously the podcast is called Hope and Patience after my two grannies. Yep. But I would love you to share a time, if you can remember a time when you had to have bucket loads of hope.
I've sort of got hope for things in the future now. I hope that people like that Boyan Slat. Are you familiar with Boyan Slat? This fabulously handsome sort of 25-year-old Dutch engineer who's trying to clean up the oceans of plastic, and he's got this extraordinary dream. He's sort of Elon Musk for the next generation, but with a environmental hat on him. So I hope for the globe, but particularly the oceans. Actually, that's what I hope for. I hope for my children. I have masses of hope. I hope that they end up sort of balanced and uncontorted and disturbed like myself.
And when you, my other grandmother was called Patience. In fact, it's my middle name, and I have little of it. But what springs to mind when you think of your business and the need for patience?
I think patience is super, super, super important. And I think a lot of people are very impatient these days, and they want success overnight, and they set up a website and they think they should have, or a blog or whatever it may be, and they should have 1 million followers, within the week. And of course there are lots of examples of that happening. So why shouldn't it happen to them? But again, I think patience, as a virtue is a great one. And any success achieved is all the sweeter for the length and of the journey that you took to get there. And probably the success is greater as a consequence of that as well. And if you don't experience all these little sort of minutiae, the little hillocks, the little problems, the little turns, the twists, the potholes along the way, it's not as much fun. You have a better life if you deal with all the issues along the way. And my message to people would be: have patience. Don't expect things to come instantaneously. That's a modern disease which we need to get to lose a bit.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rohan, so much for being my first guest on my first episode and my first series
it's been a good
of
chat.
Hope and Patience podcast. It's been absolutely brilliant.
I'm going to have another slice of chocolate.
Yeah, I had some of that exploding candy and it was popping on
It's been fun. Thanks, Amelia. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I would love to suggest to my listeners a book, and also I'll give you a little quote. So the book recommendation is exactly the same book as Rohan suggested, which is just a little Bible, and it's fantastic for all age groups. And it's something that if you're feeling a little bit tucked up, if you flick open a page, it offers magic. So it's by Charlie Mackesy, and it's called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. And my quote for this show is from the book. So what I'd like you to do is imagine a little boy and a mole sitting by his side on a rock, looking out onto a vast landscape. And the boy says, "What is that over there?" "It's the wild," said the mole. "Don't fear it." And finally, I was thinking this week about transition and about when you need to move on from something, whether it's your company has gone into liquidation or whether you've got to close your company or whether it's just that what you're doing is not right for you. And it's something that fascinates me in the way that I've just made a transition from my chocolate business, which I decided I had evolved from and my purpose had changed into this exciting world of podcasts. And with the transition phase, I found it to be a process of grieving of what had been and what was going to go. And it took huge courage and it took a lot of trust that I was actually doing the right thing. And what I found was that I had a very sort of close counsel who I shared my heart with, and they listened and they offered support as and when I needed it. And when you're getting to that stage where you're about to make that transition, you do think, oh, my goodness, perhaps there's going to be a tipping point. Perhaps I've got this so wrong. Am I really going to regret what I'm doing? I don't know if any of you have been through something similar or whether you agree with how I've found it or just your thoughts on it. And I'd really love to hear. So if you want to share any thoughts, pop it on the social media at Hope and Pat or ping me an email on the website, on the Contact Me page, because it's something that I think we should chat about, and I think it would bolster people who have got to make that transition. Don't forget to check out the goodie bag on our website where you will find my recommendations and hopefully some of yours as we get moving along the podcast for a good read and a dollop of wellbeing tips. Thank you again so much to Rohan for joining me and to you, the listener, for finding us. I'll be back with another story soon, so make sure you subscribe to get the latest episode. And if you like what you hear, feel free to give us a positive rating and spread the word. I would also love to know what you'd like to hear more of, less of, and importantly to none of. Probably just let me know via the website. So until next time, keep that sparkle. Bye.
Hope and Patience with Amelia Rope. Join the conversation at hopeandpatience.co.uk or find Amelia on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Hope and Pat.